I'm there today to tell you a little bit about the activities in the space sector in Luxembourg. As you know, Luxembourg is active in space since a long time, and I will tell you shortly when we started and what were the main milestones of the history of Luxembourg in space. And then I will go through the space policy, tell you a little bit more about the activities of the Space Agency, will explain also the Space Resources.lu initiative, and last but not least, give you an overview of the industry of Luxembourg in the space domain. So many of you may already know Luxembourg for their activities in the commercial space arena. In the middle of the 80s, the government of Luxembourg was the initiator of the Société Européenne des Satellites, SES. SES was the first commercial operator distributing television over satellite. And as you can see today, SES is one of the big players worldwide. And so that was a particularly good decision of the government at that time to start this initiative. And what this shows as well is that already in the middle of the 80s, Luxembourg pursued space activities with a clear objective of diversification of its economy. The next important milestone in our history was in 2005, when Luxembourg became a member state of the European Space Agency. In 2016, the Minister of Economy announced a completely new initiative, the Initiative on Space Resources, that I will also explain shortly after. Last but not least, the creation in 2018 of the Luxembourg Space Agency that I will also present later. So as I introduced already shortly, the objective of our policy in the space domain is definitely very strongly economy driven. The country of Luxembourg has been depending on several economic sectors over the past and generally very strongly depending on it. For example, steel industry with more than 60% of GDP, and then now the service industry in the financial sector, which represents still something like 1/3 of GDP here in Luxembourg. And so since more than 20 years, the government has always tried to diversify its economy, reducing this dependency on a specific sector. And space is one of these sectors that are pursued as a priority to complement the current economic landscape of Luxembourg. Of course, doing that means that you need to expand the space capabilities. That means also that we have to work on the competitiveness of the sector. Luxembourg is a small country and we don't have a domestic market. So all our players are immediately confronted with international competition, being either at the European level but also at international level. As you know as well, space is not only a matter of competition, but it's also a lot of cooperation, and so we are also very active in international relationships. And as you know, we are very good friends as well as South Korea, and we have already initiated relationships since several years. Last but not least, as I mentioned, our history in space started with commercial activities in the satellite communication domain, and this is definitely a domain in which Luxembourg wants to keep a certain leadership. So to implement this objective of our policy, we use various instruments, but I would say there is, of course, one privileged partner that we have here in Europe. It's the European Space Agency, with whom we work a lot to implement our programs. For those who are interested to know a little bit more about our national policy, we have published the National Action Plan that is summarizing our priorities, the recent investments that we have made for the period 2020 to 2024. It can be downloaded on our website, and so I encourage those who want to know more to read this document. So as you have seen in our history, Luxembourg created its own space agency in 2018, and this space agency is not a traditional one. The fact that we are strongly pushing the economic development here in Luxembourg, of course, we are working in that direction. So we don't have our own missions. The agency is mainly there to support companies that want to develop their own activities. So this is why our 4 main missions are, first of all, support the economic growth. On the other hand, develop the space ecosystem here in Luxembourg, and you will see this means that we work on different dimensions to make that possible. The third aspect is, of course, the talent development. We have seen that developing this ecosystem will require the right skills of the people and a large enough pool of talents that should be available as well. And last but not least, of course, we continue to be very active on international level and to develop our partnerships with other countries and other players. Developing the ecosystem is something that requires actions on different levels, on different dimensions. So we have been active on the regulatory aspects with, I would say, 2 levels of interventions. Of course, on national level, where we have now 2 laws that are regulating space activities. The first one is dedicated to space resources linked activities, and the second one is for all types of space activities in Luxembourg. Near to these national regulatory aspects, we continue being very active on the international level, and especially contributing to the work of the United Nations COPUOS. I think this is an extremely important framework for us, and we are very happy that even though now with the pandemic some of the discussions have been delayed a little bit, we are very happy that, for example, the topic of space resources is high on the agenda of this working group. Second aspect is education. As I mentioned, it's extremely important for us to have the right talents available in the country for our ecosystem, being in it at industrial level or also at the level of research. And so we have here started a number of initiatives or joined some initiatives. For example, we are part of the European Space Education Resources Initiative of ESA, and we have an office here in Luxembourg. We have also 2 master programs at the University of Luxembourg. The first one in space communication and media law, and the second one master, interdisciplinary space master. We also have an agreement with ESA to welcome young graduate trainees, so the people who finish their studies, generally with a technical background, engineers and so on, are then eligible to go and work for 1 up to 2 years within ESA. And then, of course, we support various other initiatives, summer schools. We have also participated to several hackathons, which are very interesting initiatives for young people, and so that they can be confronted also with the reality of an entrepreneurship approach. On research as well, we have been quite active, and in fact we have already an ecosystem that is developing technologies and research topics in space since a long time. But recently we have also set up the European Space Resources Innovation Center, and we have done that in cooperation with LIST, which is one of our research centers here in Luxembourg, and ESA. So I will come back shortly on the resources topic later, but this is of course a very unique center in Europe but also worldwide, and I think it's important here to understand that it's not only about research, but the fact that we have put innovation in the name shows also that we relatively quickly expect also to have a transfer of this new knowledge that will be generated to industrial applications and activities. We have also started a few years ago the initiative on LSA data center. So as many of you certainly know, Europe has developed quite a large constellation of Earth observation satellites within the framework of the Copernicus program. And in Luxembourg we have now a data center that is storing data from Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 series. We have the full archive here in Luxembourg, which also gives a quite unique character to this data center. And of course, we are doing that with the hope to support the development of new applications using Earth observation data. And this is also fully in line with the National Digital Luxembourg initiative, which is really pushing forward the digitalization of industrial activities. Next topic is, of course, about financing. We have been active since a number of years supporting the companies with their R&D activities. So we help them developing innovation, new products and new services. We have here a focus still on the type of applications and developments that are closer to the market. So satellite communications and applications are definitely within our main priorities. The second priority that joined later is on exploration and the utilization of space resources. Another aspect that came up recently is the need for more investment. As you probably know, the traditional way to work of space is rather an institutional approach where companies are delivering technologies, services to agencies or governments. And what we have seen appearing over the last 5 to 10 years is a much more entrepreneurial-driven approach where we see companies developing their own activities with the aim also to serve commercial customers. And for this type of activities, it's extremely important that the companies benefit from equity, capital investment. And so we have worked also over the last years to develop more instruments to make investors aware about this opportunity so that our startups, small innovative companies also can access financing. So now it's the moment, I think, to give you a few explanations about our Space Resources.lu initiative. So this is an initiative that we started in 2016, and what we talk about here is resources that you can find on celestial bodies in the universe. So we talk about materials that you find, for example, on the Moon, on Mars, or asteroids, and that can be water, other types of volatiles, methane, metals as well. The regolith itself can be used as a valuable resource to do things, and of course, premium group metals that also can be a good source for developments. So all these materials can then be used for certain applications. And there as well, we have identified a number of applications where using the resources directly originating from space would bring an enormous value to space in general. And so we have identified that as really a disruptive approach for the future. Today we have to take everything with us into a rocket. And in the future, if we have all these resources available and we are able to manufacture new materials, new equipments within space, this will completely change the dynamics of the economic equation in space. And so this is an initiative that has a long-term objective. We, of course, are aware that it's not immediately for tomorrow, but being positioned on this very visionary theme is important for Luxembourg, and so we expect also in 20, maybe 30 years to be one of the pioneers for the applications that will then materialize. To implement this initiative, we have developed a specific strategy with 5 pillars. The first one is related to the political support. It's important because this is still a topic that requires a lot of work to create awareness, to explain what we talk about, and of course is also subject for international cooperation. The second aspect that we address within this strategy is the legal framework. And again, we are very happy that this is also taken up within the United Nations. And of course, you need to develop R&D within university or research centers, but also within the companies, and last but not least, you also have to be prepared for future investments when these activities become more commercial. So, and then let me finish now with a little bit the evolution or the landscape of our industry here in Luxembourg. This has developed quite a lot, and I think this objective of diversity is already somehow achieved because we have really very diverse activities in Luxembourg in space, coming from companies that develop a space segment, others that are active on the ground segment. Of course, Luxembourg is recognized worldwide for their in-space operations capabilities, essentially with the presence of SES in Luxembourg. And last but not least, and which is also a thematic that still has really a lot of potential, is on the downstream, the services, all the analytics of the space data that are collected with satellites. So, as you can imagine, we are very interested as well to see what that represents in terms of socioeconomic benefits. As I mentioned, our objective is to create a diverse economy, to bring space within this portfolio of economic activities. And so we are following the proportion this space sector represents in our GDP. And as you can see, there has been quite an important evolution since 2012 when we started our statistics. And even over the last few years, the trend is quite important. We don't have figures yet for 2019 and 2020, but we can see only with the number of companies that are now established in Luxembourg that we can expect even better figures for the future in terms of employees and also in terms of added value created for the sector. So thank you very much for having given me this opportunity to share with you a little bit the last actions and measures that we have taken in Luxembourg. And of course, I would be delighted to also in the future be present with you to continue share with you what we do here in Luxembourg. Thank you very much.